Welcome back to a live reading of The Effigy of Love, as written by Tony Schulerblom and read by Juho Hankela. This is Chapter 6, Painting the Infinite. Taking a deep breath, the intoxicating fumes of the paint stinging in his nose, Hendrik let go of every doubt and hesitation and let the memory of their encounter by the pond take control. He saw the verdant trees and their rough bark. He saw the lily pads bobbing on the crystal clear surface of the pond, the water reflecting the clouds above. He saw the sun peeking through the treetops. Hendrik dipped the brush into the paint, but as soon as the tip of the brush was stained with the most beautiful hue, the memory changed shape. Suddenly, the sweetest music echoed from deep inside of his heart, reverberating from his chest out to all of his limbs, making his fingers tingle and his mind wild. You see, as the scene formed itself in front of him, so did the memory of her. But the vision wasn't static as the memory of the glade. No, not only could he see her, skipping and dancing on the canvas, he could hear her in the music that was playing in the air around him. He could feel her presence in the wind that was blowing. It was an unimaginable beauty, yet there it was, surrounding him in all perceivable ways. It drew him, his soul, in so close that he almost melted onto the canvas and joined her. Alas, no matter how much he wanted to dissolve into the mixture of pigments and adhere himself to her splendor, he could but enjoy the beautiful dance and the familiar song at a distance. And that is enough, Hendrik thought to himself, as he discarded the ugly human trait of always wanting more and instead basked in the present moment. Around him he heard the same song the birds and the wind had sung that fateful evening when he first saw her standing by the oak. Enchanted by his own vivid imagination, he lifted the brush to the canvas and watched as his mind traced her every movement. First, the brush flew across the canvas, adding a spring green tint where her feet touched the ground and her shadow played around. Then it dipped into the middle, adding the blue that was the pond, spreading its calm hue for her to wet her toes in. Then the brush streaked high, crowning the trees in ever-verdant flourish for the birds to sing in, as well as dotting a brilliant yellow orb that smiled warmth upon her where it floated weightless in an ocean of blue. Every little thing of beauty he had ever witnessed by the pond was added with strokes upon strokes, all to the music of her soul, his heart. The green lily pads bobbed in a steady rhythm as the frogs leaped into the blue. The lichen crept higher upon the sturdy grey rocks. The buzzing insects added their chorus to the warbling symphony. Once all this vivid beauty had been added to the canvas, came the moment he had been waiting for. The time to add the sovereign beauty to his piece of heaven, the keeper of his heart, the savior in the dark. Eyes fixated on the scene, he dropped the wet brush to the stained floor and grabbed a clean one untainted and pure, befitting of holding her colors. He wet the brush and leaned closer, desperate to feel her warmth breathe in his skin, but he was crazy to even think such a thought. Thus, with the gentlest touch, as if afraid he would scare her away, he started adding the capture of his heart to the canvas, just behind the oak, right in the spot where he had seen her for the first time. Hundreds of heartbeats passed in total silence and imagined song, yet the moment felt so short once he straightened his back and gazed upon his creation. It was better than he could have ever imagined. No matter how insecure he had been at first, once he had let go of all thoughts and followed his heart, he had succeeded in doing her beauty justice. There, peeking from behind the majestic oak behind the pond, her pale skin almost radiated with light in comparison to the dark bark. Her long hair tickled her back as the wind whispered their shared secret. Her sharp jaw and soft cheeks were a perfect symmetry, rivaling even the constellations in the sky. Her deep, enthralling eyes, the brightest stars in the known universe, held a longing within them, a much familiar feeling to young Hendrik. Are we two one of the same? Do you two seek to escape the grave, to mingle with a kindred soul? Alas, the present moment was not the time for existential questions. They were finally together, and the moment would be savored and enjoyed in such a way that it would leave a permanent impression on his mind, so that not a single grey thought would ever dare intrude on his thoughts ever again. The one young lover dancing on the canvas, covering the world with her colorful footprints, the other one basking in its enchanting presence, trailing her steps with the colors of his heart. Even though a mass of gray had rolled in and covered the moon, making the last rays of light escape the room, it bothered them none. He didn't need his eyes. His heart and soul were in control. All he did was dance to her familiar melody and rhythm, a song of dreams, love, and belonging. When the music finally stopped, Hendrik snapped out of his trance. The brush fell to the floor as his arms fell slack to his sides. He noticed he was breathing heavily, the chemical fumes souring the back of his throat. Though they had spent hours together in blissful reverie, it was somehow still the dark of night, and the whole castle was as silent as the grave. All he could hear was his heart beating inside of his chest and the air slipping out of him. Though he couldn't see the canvas, nor whatever traces their dance had left, he smiled wide as he reached out toward it. He could sense her in front, without, within him. He had no words for what occurred that night, but something magical and indescribable had happened. And whatever had come out of it would be revealed come dawn. "Thank you, my love," Hendrik whispered, and gently touched the edge of the canvas. The paint stained his fingers, and for a split second he felt her soft touch, before the world grew stale and grey around him once more. Yet it did not matter, not this time. He had painted a window to his soul, and henceforth could sit by it whenever he wished. Feeling exhausted yet ecstatic, Hendrik let his cloak fall onto the floor and headed straight to bed. With a smile on his lips, he let his head fall onto the pillow and stared into the black abyss above him. It didn't bother him in the least that he had left that verdant dream of his and stepped back into a dark world. No, in the utter darkness that he swam in, he felt as if he wasn't in the same room, no, the same world anymore. It felt as if he had entered that celestial window and painted not only the canvas, but the universe. But of course, this was only a feeling. Yet still he wished, more than anything, that he could steep into the canvas and join her forever. Gently rubbing the dried paint on his fingers with his thumb, he smiled, imagining it was her. Floating in a sea of happiness, he took a deep breath, basking in her powerful, inebriating presence. Though the room reeked with the smell of paint, he felt his lungs fill with her in the same way they had in the forest. That's how he knew that he was still in her presence, and that come tomorrow he would be able to see her whenever he wished, even in the comforts of his own home.